Watching history, you're witnessing a message the whole world needs right now. A message that goes beyond borders, beyond religion, beyond war. So don't blink. Don't scroll. Don't miss a second. Because what you're about to hear isn't just powerful, it's necessary. It's the reason peace still breathes in a world gasping for air. Stay with me to the very last word, because this might just change the way you see everything. Peace is not simply what happens when the guns go quiet or the bombs stop falling. Peace is not the empty silence after destruction. It's deeper. It's stronger. True peace lives in the heart, in the soul, in the choices we make, even when the world around us is burning. It's not just a condition, it's a conviction. Because real peace is not defined by what's happening on the outside. It's defined by what survives on the inside. And when a people know who they are, when they know what they believe in, when their purpose is rooted in faith, no amount of chaos can take that away. When missiles fall from the sky, they shake the ground, tear through homes and take lives. But they can never touch a mother's prayer, a child's dream, or a nation's truth. And that's where real peace lives, in the places weapons can't reach. It lives in a father who still teaches his son to be kind in a time of violence. It lives in a teacher who still shows up, chalk in hand, even though the classroom walls are shattered. It lives in a people who still bury their dead with honor and dignity, refusing to let hatred steal their humanity. Peace isn't passive. It's not weak. It doesn't hide. Real peace shows up in the darkest hour. It is a fire that burns quietly in the heart of a person who refuses to let war define them. That fire says, you may take everything I have, but you will not take who I am. And that kind of peace is stronger than any missile, more powerful than any army, because it lives not in policies, but in people. This is why you will see peace surviving even in the ruins, a child still smiling, a call to prayer still echoing through broken streets, a woman still covering her head and walking proudly through the dust. That is purpose. That is faith. That is peace. When you have a reason to live beyond fear, beyond revenge, beyond survival, that's when you are truly free. And no amount of war can steal that. They thought dropping bombs would destroy everything, but they forgot that some things are untouchable. Purpose, conviction, belief, these are the foundations of true peace. And that kind of peace, it doesn't fall. It doesn't flee. It stays standing long after the last missile hits the ground. When conflict erupts and the ground shakes beneath your feet, the first instinct is to run, to shield, to protect what little remains. But there are people, whole communities, even nations that do not run. They rise, not because the danger isn't real, but because their conviction is stronger than the fear. Conviction is the invisible force that war can never touch. It lives in the heart, in the spine, in the prayers whispered behind closed doors. When bombs rain from the sky and the lights go out, it's conviction that keeps the soul lit. It's conviction that says, I know who I am, and I will not forget it, just because the world has gone mad. You can shake buildings, burn homes, scatter families, but you cannot shake someone whose roots run deeper than the destruction around them. That's why some of the strongest people you ever meet are those who've had everything taken from them, except their dignity. Conflict is a thief. It tries to steal peace, comfort, stability, but it cannot steal your character. It cannot steal your faith unless you hand it over. And some people, some nations never do. They lock it inside, they guard it like gold, and they pass it on to their children as the only inheritance worth dying for. Conviction turns pain into purpose. It doesn't erase the suffering, but it gives it meaning. It tells the wounded, your pain matters, your endurance counts. You are not just surviving, you are standing for something. In places where war has become a daily sound, people still gather to pray. They still cook meals. They still teach, love, build. That's not weakness, that's resistance. That's saying, you may take my land, but you will not take my truth. And it's that truth, the truth a person lives for and dies for, that keeps their spirit from collapsing under the weight of war. Conviction builds invisible armor. It's not made of steel, but of stories, faith, and memory. The kind of armor that turns victims into survivors and survivors into symbols. This is how nations endure when logic says they shouldn't. This is how children grow up in rubble and still learn how to dream because they saw their parents stand tall, even when the bombs fell low. Conflict tests everyone, but it didn't defeat everyone. Because those who stand on conviction, on something eternal, will always rise again. The world can fall apart around them, but inside, they're unshaken. Because they didn't just build their lives on comfort, they built it on truth. And truth doesn't crumble. Truth doesn't run, truth endures. When a bomb falls, it does more than shatter buildings. It tries to shatter the spirit. Every explosion is more than just sound and smoke. It's a message meant to break the will of a people, to make them feel small, to convince them that resistance is pointless. But those who carry faith in their hearts, who see the world through the eyes of purpose and belief, hear a different message. They hear the call to stand stronger, to endure, to rise even when rising hurts. Because to them, every bomb is not a declaration of defeat. It's a divine test, a test of patience, a test of unity, a test of who they really are when everything else is stripped away. Pain, when seen through the lens of faith, becomes a forge. And what comes out of that fire is not brokenness, it's resilience. The kind of resilience that can't be trained, only born from suffering that refuses to go to waste. When missiles fall and the world turns its back, the people of conviction don't crumble. They gather. They bury their dead with tears and prayer. They rebuild with trembling hands and unshaken hope. They teach their children not just how to survive, but how to live with dignity, even in the middle of destruction. Every bomb that falls carries an echo, but those echoes don't last as long as legacy. And those who stand tall in the aftermath, who carry their pain with grace and turn their sorrow into service, outlive the war itself. Because while weapons may be forged in factories, true strength is forged in fire. And a soul that survives the fire becomes something more powerful than anything that tried to destroy it. History remembers those who win wars, but it reveres those who survive them with honor. The images of burning homes fade, but the stories of mothers who still fed their families, teachers who still opened classrooms, fathers who still led prayers in bombed-out mosques, those stories stay. They are passed down like holy relics, reminding the next generation that they come from people who stood the tests and turned every attempt to destroy them into another reason to believe. So yes, bombs fall, they always have. but they do not write the final word. The final word belongs to those who endure, those who turn graves into gardens, ruins into roads, ashes into action. Because when you walk through the fire and still hold on to your soul, you've already won something no enemy can take away. That's why for those with faith, every bomb is not the end. It's the beginning of something greater, something eternal. A scar, maybe, but never a surrender. Peace that is born in comfort is fragile. It's the kind that disappears at the first sound of gunfire, the kind that crumbles under pressure, the kind that exists only as long as everything goes according to plan. But peace forged in hardship is a different kind of peace. It's not written in treaties or signed behind closed doors. It's written in sacrifice and struggle, in the quiet decisions people make when the world around them is falling apart. That peace is not just a pause in violence. It's a mindset, a way of life, a choice to hold on to dignity when chaos demands surrender. You don't find that peace in luxury. You find it in the heart of someone who has lost everything and still chooses to love, to forgive, to keep going. When a nation is under attack, when its people are suffering, when each day feels like a test of survival, that is when the real meaning of peace shows itself. It's not soft, it's not weak, it doesn't hide behind words. It walks through fire with its head held high. It feeds the hungry even when the kitchen is broken. It comforts the grieving even when there are no answers. It builds schools from rubble and plants hope where only ashes remain. That kind of peace cannot be faked. It cannot be bought. It has to be lived, earned, and proven under pressure. There is a reason why the world watches places that suffer and yet still shine. Because it reminds us all that peace is more than the absence of conflict. It's the presence of values that cannot be shaken by violence. It's the strength to remain human when everything around you says become an animal. It's the courage to keep your faith when faith is all you have left. That's what separates real peace from temporary calm. Real peace is what holds a mother together as she prays over her child's grave. It's what carries a father back to work even when he's lost his home. It's what keeps communities united when war tries to tear them apart. Peace forged in hardship teaches a nation what really matters. It strips away the noise and reveals the soul. It builds bonds that no treaty ever could. Because when people survive suffering together, they come out not just more united, but more unbreakable. And that's the kind of peace the world needs now. Not the kind that depends on politics or power, but the kind that rises from the ashes, shaped by faith, held together by purpose, and carried by people who know what it means to walk through hell and still choose heaven. That kind of peace can't be destroyed. It can't be shaken. Because it wasn't handed down. It was built by hand with tears, prayers, and the kind of strength only pain can teach. In times of war, the world looks for protection in weapons, in walls, in alliances, in technology. Nations build armies, manufacture missiles, and race to outgun the enemy, believing that strength comes from firepower. But the people who truly survive war, who rise from its ashes with their spirit intact, are not the ones with the most guns. They're the ones with the most faith. Because when everything outside you falls apart, the only thing that can hold you together is what's inside. And faith is the shield that no weapon can penetrate. It is invisible, but it is immovable. It may not stop the missile from falling, but it will stop the soul from breaking. Faith is not a slogan. It's not something you wear only when it's safe. It's the quiet voice that whispers, stand firm when the world screams, run. It's what allows a person to hold their ground even when their hands are empty and their heart is heavy. Faith says, you can take my roof, you can take my bread, but you will never take my belief in something greater. That kind of faith becomes a shield, not against death, but against despair. It guards the mind from surrender, the heart from hatred, and the soul from fear. It turns victims into survivors and survivors into symbols. In the darkest moments of war, when the sirens fade and the silence of loss takes over, it's faith that keeps people breathing. When the power is cut and the roads are destroyed, it's faith that lights a candle and leads the way. It's not just about religion, it's about conviction. The belief that life still has meaning, that there is justice beyond what the eyes can see, and that pain is not the end of the story. It allows a mother to keep nurturing, a father to keep providing, a nation to keep rising, because they trust in a truth no bullet can touch. Faith gives courage to forgive when revenge is easier. It builds bridges in places filled with rubble. It speaks of peace in a language only the heart understands. In places where war has tried to erase identity, faith restores it. Where fear spreads like fire, faith becomes water. And even when the skies rain missiles, the people who carry true belief walk through the fire with their heads high, not because they are unafraid, but because they know their strength comes from beyond this world. Faith doesn't prevent the storm, but it makes sure you never drown in it. And that kind of shield is stronger than any weapon ever made. In a world filled with rage and revenge, where violence often begets more violence, the greatest act of courage is to keep loving when you have every reason to hate. When a nation is bombed, when its people are displaced, when its children grow up in the sound of airstrikes and sirens, hatred becomes an easy answer. But some people, some cultures, some hearts choose a different path. They choose mercy in the middle of misery. They choose hope in the middle of heartbreak. And that choice, that rare, defiant, beautiful choice, is what keeps peace alive even when everything else is falling apart. A wounded nation that keeps loving is the bravest nation of all, because it refuses to let pain rewrite its soul. It takes strength to fight, but it takes greater strength not to let the fight define you. When a family loses everything but still opens their door to a neighbor, when a teacher still teaches kindness in a classroom without a roof, when a father buries his child and still tells his remaining children to choose faith over fury, that's not weakness. That's divine resilience. That's love that refuses to rot under the weight of war. That's of people who have seen the worst of humanity and still choose to believe in its best. And that choice isn't accidental. It's spiritual. It's intentional. It's the result of generations taught not just how to endure hardship, but how to transform it. Revenge is loud, it screams, but love is stronger. It whispers and still moves mountains. When missiles fall and the world watches in silence, it's love that picks up the broken pieces. It's love that stitches wounds with prayer and forgives the unforgivable. That kind of love does not erase the pain, but it purifies it. It doesn't forget what was lost, but it honors it by refusing to multiply the suffering. We are conditioned to love with pain. We feel the loss, but it honors it by refusing to multiply the suffering. In the face of death, destruction, and betrayal, love says, we will not become what hurt us. That is real power. The world often celebrates victory in terms of land won or enemies defeated. But the true measure of greatness is what a people become in their suffering. Do they lose their soul, or do they find it? A wounded nation that still chooses compassion, that still raises its children to value peace, that still believes in justice without losing its mercy. That nation is not just surviving, it's leading. It's teaching the rest of the world that peace is not the absence of pain, but the presence of love in the middle of it. That message is what the world needs today. Not more weapons, not more enemies, but more hearts that refuse to hate. Because any nation can build walls or armies, but only the bravest build peace with broken hands and bleeding hearts. And that kind of peace, that kind of love, it lasts forever. Missiles may fall, cities may shake, and walls may crumble, but what survives is what was never made of concrete in the first place. Purpose, conviction, faith, and love. These are not things that can be bombed or sanctioned or silenced.